Today, we will go through the trial of Troxdale, Stevens, and Upton. Would there really be enough evidence for a conviction? What evidence did the prosecution really have to say that the three people were guilty of the crime? Were the defense witnesses enough to gain an acquittal? All aboard the Kentucky Tennessee Living Time Machine. Please fasten your seatbelts and keep your arms and legs inside of the vehicle at all times. But to get going, we need your help. We still need to fire up that time machine to transport us. Please help us by clicking on the like, subscribe, and bell notification buttons down below. Not only does this fire up the time machine for our flight back in time, but it convinces the YouTube algorithm that we need a bigger vehicle to reach more people who love history as much as you do. Now, back to our story. The arrest of the co-conspirators. Now, it was not unusual for women to be arrested for their crimes back in the 1840s. However, it was very hard to get a conviction against them. To put this in a little context, this happened during the rule of Queen Victoria, who ruled from June 1837 until her death in 1901. She made sweeping changes to the law of the land of England, which kind of spilled over into the attitudes of the people of the United States. In an era where women were considered to be too weak and or meek to commit murder, and if they did, it was thought that they would use underhanded methods such as poison or killing a man in his sleep. It was thought impossible for a woman to chop up a person and then set fire to their corpse in such a defiling way. It was as impossible as a mountain growing legs and walking away. We will see a lot of this attitude in the way the Tennesean speaks about the evidence of the crime. The first jury trial. First, let's read what the Tennesean had to say about the first trial witnesses and evidence. Upon the trial, some witnesses spoke of the old man O'Neill reprehending Patsy for her lewd blank, and of Patsy's having to use some threats against her father on account of his abuse and harsh treatment of her. But there was no evidence of any ill feeling on her part towards her mother or her brothers and sisters. At the time of the supposed murder, Patsy was about 18 years of age. The proof introduced against her was entirely circumstantial and too minute to be detailed. Several witnesses were introduced by the defendant to show that old man O'Neill was a violent and dangerous man when in liquor. A heathenish man, to use the language of 2 or 3 of the witnesses. One witness proved that Patsy came after him on one occasion to pacify her father, who was treating his family with great brutality. That on his way to O'Neill's, he heard a gunfire, and upon going to the house, he found O'Neill's wife crying, and she said in the presence of her husband that the load of the gun had passed near her through a crack of the house. Another witness testified that O'Neill had confessed to him that he had once attempted to take his own life, and showed him a hole in his ear, which he said had been made by a bullet in the attempt to commit the act. Upon this state of facts, the counsel for the defendant Patsy, Sam Turney, Esquire, after acquiring the points of law involved in the case, and insisting upon the insufficiency of the evidence to sustain the conviction, very ingeniously and ably contended that this horrible tragedy had been perpetrated by the old man in one of his mad fits, that the very nature of the transaction, the murder of the whole family down to the infant almost in the cradle, demonstrated that it could only have been committed by a madman. No adequate cause had been shown why any of the defendants had perpetrated so fell a crime. That it was inconceivable a child of the age of 18, a girl, could, as it were, in the moment, have steeped herself so dimly in the crime as to murder her father, mother, brothers, and sisters, and have gone to work so symptomatically to conceal it, even if she were able physically to have consummated the act herself. That it was equally inconceivable that she could have induced either or both of the defendants, Upton and Stevens, without any enmity against the O'Neill family, and without any hope of gain, the family being of the very poorest, to aid her in the commission of so hellish an act, that the mysterious nature of the case could only be accounted for by the supposition mentioned, and that the annals of crime were filled with cases equally hideous and fearful as the present, the acts of sudden or continued insanity, but that no parallel could be found of acts of deliberate crime performed without adequate motive and not in the heat of passion." Unquote. Now, wait a minute. We have several defense witnesses to state that Edward O'Neill was well known in the community to be abusive toward his family, that he was even prone to extreme violence against them. We also have the fact that the Tennesean itself says that there was so little evidence against Patsy that it really didn't need to be mentioned in the article. So, what was the evidence? At this time, it has not been revealed. But we do have what the defense has to say about Upton and Stevens. Reading again from the Tennesean. Quote, in regard to defendants Upton and Stevens, the proof showed that they had made an assiduation with the defendant, Patsy, to meet them in the fodder house on Friday night before the burning, that they spent the night with her at the place designated, that they left about daylight, went through a thickly settled neighborhood openly, breakfasted within a mile or two of the place at a friend's, and were seen going in the direction of home some 5 or 6 miles on their way, about 12 o'clock of the day. They were dressed in white clothes, and no mark of blood was noticed upon them or on any of the articles found in the fodder house. No enmity or ill feeling was shown to have existed on their part against O'Neill or his family. They stated at first to different persons, when asked where they spent the night on Friday, that they had slept out on the mountain. But Upton afterwards frequently admitted that he had stayed at the fodder house, and that he had told a different story because he did not want his wife to know of his intimacy with Patsy. Both Stevens and Upton remained in the country after the date of the burning as before. Upton was proved to have sustained a good character to the period in question. The jury found the defendants all guilty as charged. They moved for a new trial, and upon its being refused, appealed to the Supreme Court. Unquote. Possible reason behind the guilty verdict. We do have a report given to us about the verdict and how people read it in the newspapers of the time. The New York Herald, dated January 26, 1849. Quote, Patsy A. Troxdale, Nicholas Stevens, and William E. Upton had been convicted at Nashville, Tennessee, of the murder of the O'Neill family, which was committed in Overton County, Tennessee, on the 1st of September, 1846. Unquote. From the way the Tennesean reads so far, we can surmise that the only reason why the 3 people were found guilty of this crime is because they happened to be at the residence during the time frame of the murders. And even the cover-up as to where Upton and Stevens were was explained. Neither man wanted to tell their wives that they were at Patsy's home having a good time that night. It seems that the unexplained evidence against Troxdale, Stevens, and Upton was pretty damning. If they weren't guilty, they certainly acted guilty. There was a call for a new trial, which was denied. So, the defense sent their case up to the Tennessee Supreme Court for a decision on the matter. In next week's video, we will begin to uncover what the Supreme Court had to say about the case and whether or not the conviction will be overturned. Thank you. Kentucky Tennessee Living would like to thank you for watching our video series on the myths and legends of the Appalachian Mountains. Don't forget to hit that like button, as the more likes we receive, the more likely YouTube is to suggest our videos to other viewers. Also, to receive notice when we upload a new video, be sure to subscribe and click the bell notification button. Please be sure to double check that you are subscribed, as some of our viewers are finding that they are no longer subscribed to our channel. We thank you for continuing to support Kentucky Tennessee Living as we are discovering the mysteries in Appalachian history.